Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
No! Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
And now here I am, out on the campaign trail in an election where we have consistently been hearing hurtful, hateful language about women. Language that has been painful for so many of us, not just as women, but as parents trying to protect our children and raise them to be caring, respectful adults. And as citizens who think that our nation's leaders should meet basic standards of human decency.
Is that so wrong?
The fact is that in this election, we have a candidate for president of the United States who over the course of his lifetime, in the course of this campaign, has said things about women that are so shocking, so demeaning, that I simply will not repeat anything here today. And last week, we saw this candidate actually bragging about sexually assaulting women. And I can't believe that I'm saying that a candidate for president of the United States has bragged about sexually assaulting women. And I have to tell you that I can't stop thinking about this. It has shaken me to my core in a way that I couldn't have predicted. So while I'd love nothing more than to pretend like this isn't happening and to come out here and do my normal campaign speech, it would be dishonest and disingenuous to me to just move on to the next thing like this was all just a bad dream. This is not something that we can ignore. It's not something we can just sweep under the rug as just another disturbing footnote in a sad election season. Because this was not just a lewd conversation. This wasn't just locker room banter. This was a powerful individual speaking freely and openly about sexually predatory behavior and actually bragging about kissing and groping women, using language so obscene that many of us were worried about our children hearing it when we turn on the TV. And to make matters worse, it now seems very clear that this isn't an isolated incident. It's one of countless examples of how he has treated women his whole life. And I have to tell you that I listen to all of this and I feel it so personally. And I'm sure that many of you do too, particularly the women.
That was amazing. I got to tell you, if you didn't hear or see Michelle Obama today in New Hampshire, you must go to Hillary Clinton's YouTube channel and listen to the entire speech that Michelle Obama gave today. Michelle Obama versus Donald Trump, credibility-wise, anybody want to take that on? Anybody? Donald Trump shortly, he waited until Michelle Obama was done, which for him is, kind of courteous. But he's always late, so I don't know if he was actually deferring to her or if he was being kind or if he was, waiting his turn. I don't know. But then later on in the afternoon, just around an hour ago, Donald Trump is giving speeches here in West Palm Beach. He's right up the road here. And this was his rebuttal to the news that came from not just the New York Times. I'm sure you know by now that Jessica Leeds, who's a 74-year-old woman who 30 years ago was a businesswoman, and she was, a traveling salesman, basically, for a paper company, was flying into New York from the Midwest, and she was on a flight with Donald Trump, and she recounts her horror story sitting next to him with octopus hands. And then there's another woman named Rachel Crooks, who was a 22-year-old woman who was working in Trump Tower, who was accosted by him in the elevator. Then, of course, there's a Miss Utah, there's a Miss Arizona, there's a People magazine writer, and there's 4 Miss Teen. Oh, yes. Miss Teen USA contestants who have all said that he walked into the dressing room, they were naked, and when they, went to, put their robes on or, react in some way, he said, "Oh, don't worry, ladies, I've seen it all before." You've seen underage girls naked before? You've seen that before? But this was his response today.
From People magazine, who wrote a story on Melania and myself on our first anniversary. The story was beautiful. It was beautiful. It was lovely. But last night we hear that after 12 years, this took place 12 years ago, this story, a new claim that I made inappropriate advances during the interview to this writer. And I ask a very simple question. Why wasn't it part of the story that appeared 20 or 12 years ago? Why wasn't it part of the story? Why didn't they make it part of the story? I was one of the biggest stars on television with The Apprentice, and it would have been one of the biggest stories of the year.
Oh my God.
Think of it. She's doing a story on Melania, who's pregnant at the time.
There you go.
And Donald Trump, our 1-year anniversary. And she said, I made inappropriate advances. And by the way, the area was a public area, people all over the place. Take a look. You take a look. Look at her words. You tell me what you think. I don't think so. I don't think so.
Oh my God, he won't stop. I mean, this is just crazy. His response was, "Look at her. Why would I have anything to do with that? She's unattractive. I don't find her, so you didn't find Miss Utah attractive either, I guess, or Miss Arizona, or the 4 Miss Teen USAs, or, I mean, this is, he is in such a downward spiral now that, if you were a betting guy, I would bet that the Chicago Cubs wins the World Series before I would bet that Donald Trump wins the presidency. If we show it. Well, what's their curse? The GOAT thing? What is their curse?
I don't know sports ball.
What a team. Thank you very much. But I mean, honest to God, I would take that bet at this point, but it all depends on whether or not people show up to vote. The polling looks terrible. He's desperate. This is scary. We've got 26 days, and in 26 days, this man is setting himself on fire. It's almost to the point where I feel bad. I almost feel bad because, when you're watching somebody self-immolate, it's kind of, sad, to watch somebody do that. But he's taken everybody with him, which removes my sadness. Do you know what I mean? Now, here's another thing that's going on, besides for all the sex stuff and all the assault stuff. And by the way, the reason these women finally decided to put their 2 cents in, and he is threatening to sue them. He says he's preparing a lawsuit. They better lawyer up. They're not attractive enough for me to touch them or want them or kiss them or, whatever. Aside from that, he's getting punked by WikiLeaks. Oh, yes, he's getting punked. Now, I think I need to explain what all these documents are real quick. The speeches, the Wall Street speeches that have been released by, that we're reading, snippets of, that Hillary Clinton gave in October of 2013, those are the speeches. Those were produced from a Freedom of Information Act request. So get that straight, in your head. And then there's the other stuff. There's the WikiLeaks emails. And some of those are real. And the Clinton campaign, when they see them, have not denied the real ones are exactly what they represent themselves to be. However, there are other emails that are mixed in, and it seems to me it's mostly the Podesta emails, that group of emails, and I don't know how many people are actually, doing the work or care enough to read these things, but the Podesta emails are not real. There were 2 yesterday, one involving Jennifer Palmieri trashing Catholics, and Jessica Palmieri had to come out and say, I'm Catholic and John Podesta's Catholic. I don't think we were trashing Catholics, and I don't recognize that email. So because the Clinton campaign didn't, denigrate the real emails, and people were calling me saying, well, why don't they just say that they're all fake and they're... And this is why, because some of them are real and some of them aren't. And the Clinton campaign isn't denying the real ones, but they are denying the fake ones. And one of the fake ones was a John Podesta. It seems that batch was riddled with Russian, machinations, Russian, just making crap up and slamming them into the release and trying to get away with it, and idiot boy Donald Trump picked up on some of these emails and got on the stage and started saying, now there's a Benghazi email where clearly it shows that she knew and Podesta knew there was something she could have done to save Benghazi and she didn't do it. And oh, that bitch. And oh my God, I can't believe it. Blah, blah, blah. Except that email is not real. This is the problem. The email was really a 10,000 word article that was written by Kurt Eichenwald of Newsweek. And Kurt Eichenwald was on the TV last night, trying to explain as much as he could that some of these WikiLeaks were really fake. And he knew it because he had written those words himself. So I find it really fascinating that Trump got punked again. But here's one with Kurt Eichenwald talking about how he was looking at these emails and, trying to figure out, how to write about them, what to write about them, how to report them, what was, wrong with what was being said. And all of a sudden he's reading this one and he's like, that looks so familiar. Okay, play.
One important point has been universally acknowledged by the 9 previous reports about Benghazi. This is Sidney Blumenthal. The attack was almost certainly preventable, Benghazi. If the GOP wants to raise that as a talking point against her, it is legitimate. In other words, he's now admitting that they could have done something about Benghazi. This just came out a little while ago.
Idiot.
But our next guest says those remarks are not from the Clinton confidant, Sidney Blumenthal, and that Russia is behind Trump's mix-up. Here to explain is senior writer for Newsweek and New York Times bestselling author Kurt Eichenwald. Kurt, nice to have you here. How do you know that Sidney Blumenthal was not behind that quote that Donald Trump was reading?
Because I wrote it. What's amazing here, Sidney Blumenthal sent an email to John Podesta that attached an article that I wrote. And it is impossible to look at the Blumenthal email and not realize that this 10,000 words that follows are from Newsweek. They say Newsweek, 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 time and time again. And deep in the article are those 2 sentences that the Russian government, through a Russian news agency, published as an article saying this was the October surprise, and it shows that even Hillary Clinton's, close allies knew that she could have stopped Benghazi.
So what's the assertion?
And then a few hours.
So is the assertion that, not that he misread the email that came out in the WikiLeaks, your assertion is that somehow Donald Trump got a hold of Russian propaganda outside of the WikiLeaks dump and was using that?
There are 2 possibilities. One is that both the Russians and Donald Trump were tricked into believing a manipulated email, or the Russians manipulated it and Donald Trump fell for it. But there's absolutely, if you look at the email, it is impossible to come away believing that email, that the part that was just quoted, came from Sidney Blumenthal.
It's amazing. First of all, Sidney Blumenthal, that name has become like the big boogeyman of this particular election, like George Soros was back in 2004 and 2008. It was all George Soros. Even everything that we ever did at Air America, it was all because of George Soros. George Soros was giving us so much money. We got no money from George Soros, which I find fascinating. But now it's all Sidney Blumenthal. It's like you say, Sidney Blumenthal 3 times and Beetlejuice appears or something. You know what I mean? He's like the Voldemort of this election. It's all you have to do. But Donald Trump was punked twice. The Alex Jones crowd, the Breitbart crowd, the ones that stayed up till 5 o'clock in the morning broadcasting, waiting for the WikiLeaks thing to happen. And then Julian Assange gets on the thing and starts talking gibberish for about 3 hours. And they're all, sitting there going, we got punked. Except for Alex Jones, who thinks, it was some sort of a false flag. It's a false flag. So now all of a sudden these WikiLeaks come out and they're mixed up with Sputnik news clips and articles that had already been written by Kurt Eichenwald for Newsweek, and they're put out under the email of John Podesta saying that he was writing to Sidney Blumenthal. And, just saying Sidney Blumenthal is making me feel crazy. Do you know what I mean? It's like I got to feel crazy every time I said the name George Soros. It's like the second somebody would say it to me, I go, okay, a conspiracy theorist is on the phone. And then, if you downshift into, now Julian Assange, WikiLeaks, and Vince Foster, you're Alex Jones. You're freaking crazy. So, people are babbling about Sidney Blumenthal, and they end up sounding like Captain Queeg, going on about the strawberries with the balls, you know what I mean? It's like, I would say it's like Citizen Kane with Rosebud, the sled, but if it were a Donald Trump story, the sled would have been called Trump, and his last word would have been Trump. So, but only a conspiracy-crazed idiot would believe these things that are being leaked by the Russians are real emails, and Donald Trump is one of those idiots. He actually has been, giving speeches about, I now have the smoking gun. She knew about Benghazi. And really what the article said that Kurt Eichenwald wrote for Newsweek, this 10,000-word article, was saying she couldn't have known, debunking all of this, 600 messages for help went out, debunking everything. And then he has, at the very end of this very long piece, he has an of course paragraph. And the of course paragraph mentions there were legitimate points of criticism, all which have been acknowledged in 9 reports about the attack and by the former Secretary of State herself. That was what he was trying to say, that there were legitimate points of criticism, of course, but that they had been addressed. The piece itself is about the obscene politicization of the assault that killed 4 Americans.
Randy Rhodes Air Force. Air Force. RandyRhodes.com.